Now we want to look more broadly about the future of data and questions emerging around ownership of that data. I'm seeing some really interesting trends in this space. I'm seeing the space get more crowded. I personally like a fruitful, you might call it competitive, you might call it collaborative. I find that to be a very innovative space, and I think that's what we're seeing. I'll share a landscape in a second that I've been working on. I'm seeing a large number of questions around ownership of our data, of our nonprofits' data, of our partners' data, of our collective data around our effectiveness as grant makers, around need, around our collaboration and the effectiveness of our collaborations. So we're at this really pivotal, exciting moment. And I am thrilled to bring up to stage 4 incredible people working right in the middle of this. So Anne May, Liz, Shahar, and Woodrow, would you come on up on stage?
Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on, go play. Hey now, you're a rock star. Get the show on, get paid, and all that glitters.
I'm going to join you in a second. First, I want to frame this conversation, but I also want to thank Submittable. Those of you who are at all inclined to talk about social sector data should definitely find Sam Kaplan, who works for Submittable, used to be on the TAG board, used to be CIO at Walton Family Foundation. He's definitely one of the incisive thinkers around the future of data in our sector. So thank you, Sam, Submittable team, for making this keynote possible. If you have questions, I'd like you to pull out your phone, get that new Wi-Fi password that's on your table, and start submitting questions. I'll be monitoring those, and we have some time planned at the end for questions to our panelists. Here are the rules of the road. This is going to be a human conversation. Okay, these are real people trying to solve problems in our sector. So we didn't practice this for hours, okay? We're busy folks, we're working on these problems. So we're just gonna try to be human together. The other thing we're gonna try to do is dispense with that, somebody at the conference this week said, philanthrospeak. You know, that privilege that we have when using language in our sector. Somebody described it as we soften it to the point where sometimes we lose the meaning. It can be doublespeak. So we're gonna try to dispense with that too. We're gonna try to have some real talk about what it is we're up to, what are the challenges we see in the sector, how can we work together, where are we seeing some healthy friction, and need to work through that together as well. So I'm hoping we can stay in reality, but I'm also hoping we can have an overdose of hope about what it is we can do together. So don't tell anyone I said overdose at a TAG conference, but I meant an overdose of hope. And so with that, I'm gonna do just a quick flyover, and then I'll sit down and we'll start our conversation. So I alluded to that landscape a few minutes ago. As you can see, there are a number of players in this space. The space around common data initiatives, common applications, data standards. There are things that aren't even on here. If you went to the Philanthropic Data Commons session, the PDC, or maybe the Flux session, or one of the awesome sessions here, you saw the Microsoft Common Data Model also on this landscape. I don't even have that one on here. So this is just the surface of the players in the open data space right now. Some of them are for profit. Some of them are not for profit. I've worked in tech in all 3 sectors, and my personal opinion, this isn't a TAG opinion, my personal opinion is it's going to take partnership between private, public, and social in order to address some of these needs and work through them in a way that works for all of us. So up here today are 4 of the folks working on this landscape. 4 of the folks that are up here today are people actively shown working on this landscape. So I am thrilled to have that no-nonsense conversation with them. And as I move to get started, I'm going to just pull up what I think are some key success factors for this work, and then maybe our friends back in the back, Taylor, we can move to just put the Slido poll up so folks can ask some questions. Thank you guys, feeling good? Good, okay. They said they're feeling good. They said we can get started. So by way of introduction, I'd love to do like a quick 2 minutes and maybe just share why this time is different. This is not the first time we've tried to work on common data issues, common grant apps. I mean, anyone who's a regional grant maker has probably tried to work on a common grant application before. So why should we re-engage? Why is this time different? Maybe answer that question and introduce yourself along the way, if you would. Ann May, I want to start with you.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Ann May Chang, CEO of Candid. For those of you who don't know, Candid was formed about 3 years ago through the merger of GuideStar and Foundation Center, bringing together the most comprehensive source of data we have about the social sector. And to your question about what's different, I feel like everything's changed in the last few years, right? Both for good and bad, unfortunately. One of the good changes has been a real renewed focus on equity in the sector. And because of that, I think a focus on looking at how we can address the historical power imbalances that we see across the sector. And a big part of that is data, right? So we're asking really important questions about how to make data more accessible, how to have better, give nonprofits more ownership over their data, and how to address this just unreasonable burden we place on nonprofits to regurgitate data over and over again for various different funders. And so I think that's what brings us all here today, and I think it's great that there's this renewed interest and investment in tackling these problems. I think it's also great that folks are holding Candid accountable, because we certainly have ways that we could be better and that we need to be better. And so I think you're all helping us be better. Since I joined Candid just a little over a year ago, we've started to take some steps towards this, to trying to make our data more accessible. We've given free access to our tools for smaller nonprofits. We've given nonprofits a shareable profile link so that they can always share their data freely with anyone that they choose. And with our new data Demographics via Candid initiative, we're making all our demographic data freely and publicly available for the sector to use, because we think it's so foundational for our collective work on equity. But we're really just getting started. With our new platform that we're building, that we're calling internally One Candid, we're really looking at redoing our pricing model so that we factor in ability to pay as part of how we charge. And we're looking for providing better controls so that nonprofits do have more control over their data and how their data is shared. I think at the end of the day, we all want to have as much data as possible be freely available. I think that's in tension with a couple other things that I think it's important for us to also talk about, which is that the problems that we're trying to tackle as a sector are huge. There's just immense problems that seem to be getting worse every day, and we need great data to be able to tackle that. And great data takes significant investment. We've seen that over decades of work across Foundation Center and GuideStar, that real investment needs to be made there. And so I think there's this tension about how do we make sure we have enough to invest, we have as good data as we need and we deserve as a sector, and also we need that data to be around forever, right? We can't just have that data for a few years and then have it go away. We need to do this in a financially sustainable way so that we can continue to offer these services to the sector. And so we're not purporting to have the perfect answer. We have one answer today. We're very open to evolving that. That's one reason we're really excited about being part of the PDC, is I think the PDC's brought together exactly the right people who can tackle this big question of, is there a better way to make more data freely available but still be able to have high quality data and have that be financially sustainable? So in the meantime, we're trying to do everything we can to make sure cost is never a barrier for nonprofits who need to access data in order to be able to serve their missions. But it goes beyond that. As a mission-driven nonprofit, my board holds me accountable to meeting my mission, which is to make sure that we are helping the sector do as much good as possible. And what that means is that it's not just making sure that every nonprofit is able to access our tools and our data, but we need to go a step further, because it's not enough to access the tools. You need to know how to use the tools effectively. And once you identify those prospects, you need to be able to know how to write a grant application. You need to be able to, you need to have the social capital so you can actually be able to connect to those foundations, because very few grants are, kind of openly competed. And that's the reality. We need to deal with bias in the sector. So we hold ourselves accountable not only to access to data, but to ensuring we close the full loop of all nonprofits being able to access the resources they need to do good.
Amy, I'm hearing some soul searching. I know we're going to come back to that, but I actually am hearing a lot of soul searching right now at Candid. Maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think we know we don't have all the perfect answers. We're always trying to be better and get better. I think that's true across the whole sector. I think we're doing some soul searching across the whole sector to say,
think we
hey,
are.
there's a bunch of things we've been doing in the past that aren't leading us to where we want to be. And so we need to think about how we can do things differently.
I think that's good. I think that's what that landscape shows. In some ways, it shows some soul searching happening. Liz, you and I have talked about this, and you fall consistently on the side of optimism. So what are you, why is this time different for you? And share a little bit about what you're working on as well.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Kane. I'm the Managing Director of Core Services at the MacArthur Foundation. I'm also co-leading, along with John Moore, the work around building a philanthropy data commons. At MacArthur, I think it's important to know that I think about operations. I think about ensuring that our operations are efficient, effective, and equitable. And I specifically oversee our grants management department, our KM functions, knowledge management functions, and our meeting planning and events team. And I've been at the foundation for over 20 years in a variety of capacities. And I share all of that to say that what I'm bringing to this conversation about reimagining the data infrastructure that exists in philanthropy is really as a funder, as an operational person, but I also think it's important to say that I'm coming with deep humility because I certainly do not have the answers. MacArthur doesn't have the answers. Candid doesn't, have the answers, but what we are doing, I think, and I'm so pleased to be sharing the stage with all of you, is we're rolling up our sleeves and we're saying we can figure out this complex problem, but it's going to take us all to do it. And I think what's different for me, I echo what An May said, is that I think the last 2.5, 3 years, however long this pandemic
Forever. It's felt like forever.
Really brought into glaring focus the inherent power imbalance that has existed in philanthropy. It's how philanthropy was created, right? And that's not to discount that pre-pandemic, there was growing scrutiny of philanthropy and calls for philanthropy to change. But what the pandemic sort of sparked funders primarily to say that we have to change. Status quo is no longer acceptable. And we're in this period where we're trying to figure that out. What does that mean? What does a future look like if it's not what we've always been doing? Super scary, but also I am an optimist. I talk about opportunities, not problems, but this is our opportunity. So I think what's specifically different from me, stemming from that sort of that pandemic moment, if you will, is three things. It's really recognizing and seeing the change makers as central to our entire ecosystem in philanthropy. And we have to have them, I was going to say at the center of the table, but they need a seat at the table to help co-create solutions for the sector. Two, I think it's acknowledging that there's not one answer and no one entity is going to solve this problem, that it's going to take teamwork, it's going to take collaboration, it's going to take co-creation. I don't know what that looks like, but I am confident that we can figure out how to all work together to solve problems. And three, it's really seeing data and information as a sector asset that needs to be managed and controlled by the sector, and that means by all stakeholders in the sector. So I am optimistic, but I'm also terrified. So.
Yep. And compromise. All the players working this will also all have to compromise a little bit.
Compromise, they'll have to change. Let's be clear. Let's
Good,
talk
that's
clearly.
the straight talk I wanted.
Right?
Yeah, bring it.
We will have to change, and power will have to shift. But I don't see it as a zero-sum game. And ultimately, I think we're all after the same sort of vision of creating more positive impact in the world. So, sometimes our egos get in the way.
Yeah. So let's keep going with the introductions. Woodrow, you know what, for you, why is this different? What are you seeing? Why should people re-engage? Why should their ears perk up this time instead of being like, oh, another common grant application question?
So I'll start with a little bit of background, and I think that our journey speaks to what's changing. So I'm Chief Data Officer of the Giving Tuesday Data Commons. What we're doing is building the data environment and products to support a resilient and agile and thriving social sector around the world. So we're a tech company in a lot of ways. We build unprecedented data assets about individual giving behavior. We build tools for accessing and getting utility from those data. We have a collaboration platform and a knowledge management system for ensuring that this learning is deployed, and none of that is the important part. It's a community of practice. So I think a lot of approaches in the past have been about building data assets and then trying to leverage them, and we really have taken the opposite approach. It's 350 organizations in the US in our working groups. It's teams in 50 countries who are working on this. That community of practice, we build technology to leverage the community's insight and learning.
Do those exist? Can I just ask, do those exist now?
Those exist now.
So this
Yeah.
isn't roadmap, this is now.
That's right. So that's where we are today. We have great products, but the products are built to leverage that community and what they can bring. And that's what I have seen change. I mean, I'm fairly new to the sector, but we've been doing this for a few years now. And that I've seen an enormous shift in this sector toward collaboration and cooperation that just didn't exist. The norm in this sector, unlike the commercial sector I come from, was very siloed. And I've seen those walls break down pretty rapidly over the last few years.
So for you, that's a signal why people should look at this a little differently.
It is a different environment, and partly it's just maturity of some of these tools, but I really do think it's people are approaching the idea of how we work together to be bigger than the sum of our parts. That is the seismic shift that we needed in this sector.
Shahar, our friends from that private sector column over there. What are you seeing? Why did you launch Impala? Why did you jump right into this? You know all those other players on the landscape. You didn't come into this blindly. What did you see? Why now?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for inviting us. My name is Shahar Bruckner. I'm the CEO of Impala. I think that, what we're seeing is that the right conversations are happening. This I think, is a very good example of the conversation that we should have. But I think we should also recognize the fact that this sector has heard a lot of talk in the last decade. And they're very skeptical. We're hearing it from almost everybody that we're speaking with. They want to see less talking and more action, and they want to see change happening and quickly. And I think that's why we should re-engage, because I think we're actually seeing this happening. And I think this conference is a great example of that. We've seen many initiatives coming together. I think the PDC is probably the best example of that. They're taking this huge problem of common applications. Everybody's speaking about it. They're bringing everybody together, and they're starting to create a framework for action. I honestly think they should also be excited about Impala. We're tackling a different problem, one of democratizing access to data. We just launched a few weeks ago, but we already have profiles for every nonprofit and every philanthropic foundation in the United States, all of their information, every grant that is given, how they're working together, all of these things for free. We started by tackling the big elephant in the room and those problems.
I'm gonna, Shahar, pardon me for interrupting, I'm gonna ask the same question I just asked Woodrow, just to clarify. Now, like right now, you can access the data you just described.
I think about 30 people or 40 people who are in our session yesterday. Yes, you can go on impala.digital, create a user, and all of this data is readily accessible already. And I think that's the emphasis that I want to make. I think our emphasis should be on action, but not just mindless action that is listening to what people need. So if there's a problem about not having access for data, that's where we started. And I think for us, it's really the first step of the journey. We see, a whole vision in front of this. I can speak about what we already developed and what we showed in this conference in a few minutes, but if you're asking me about why people should re-engage, it's because I think this is a time of action, and action that is based on listening to what people need.
There was a conversation we had at the TAG conference this week. It's a blur, so I don't remember which conversation it was, but we talked about moving from conversation to collaboration. And I think you're adding a third piece here, and I will be honest, I hear the same thing. People want to know, are we doing or are we talking? So from conversation to collaboration to concrete solution. And so that's why I keep asking, like, is that now Woodrow? Is that now Shahar? Is that now Ann May?
It has to be
Is
now.
that now Liz, or is that future? I think that there is an increasing appetite for getting to, not foreshortening the collaboration cycle, but definitely ensuring we're getting to some concrete action as
But
well.
action can be collaboration. I mean, I think one of the sort of tenets that we are bringing to the Philanthropy Data Commons is let's build something. I mean, and let's acknowledge that we're not going to have all the answers. It's not going to be the solution. But we can iterate on that, we can build on that, and we together can co-create and make it better. But we got to start with actually having something that's tangible, that is doing the work in a different way.
Good. So let's go to you and let's dig in on the PDC a little bit. What is it right now? Why did you decide to launch it? Let's dig in maybe a couple minutes on that.
Okay.
And then we'll go to Woodrow to talk about the data commons and what you're up to there.
So the Philanthropy Data Commons, I know many of you were at the session yesterday, which those panelists were amazing, and hopefully I can do them justice. But it's a sector-wide initiative, a collaboration focused on the collection, standardization, and integration of data intended to support collective action in the sector. And it's to make data available in the right places and the right times for the right purposes. I think fundamentally, and this, might not be the right forum to say it, but it's fundamentally not a technology innovation. It's about using existing technology and using it in a different way and bringing people together in a different way to think about and create solutions and get to action. And I said it earlier, but it is also built on the tenet that changemakers have to be central to the conversation, to the discussion, and to the action. And they have to own and control their own data. That is their data asset that we continue to sort of extract and do things with, and we can still use it to make meaning around the sector, but it has to be owned and controlled by them. The other thing that is really important to understand about the Philanthropy Data Commons, and I'll just try to be explicit, is it's a new way of governing the data and information in the sector as a sector asset. And why MacArthur, when we first started, John and I, it started with innocent questions by a relatively new president who came from higher education and said, hey, Liz, hey, John, why can't philanthropy have a common grant application? Higher education could do it. Sort of this, backhanded challenge, whatever. But I think it's something that both John and I have talked about over the years, as I know many of you have talked about and done over the years. And it challenged us to just start talking to as many people as possible about the problems that they were seeing, the pain points, but also the possibilities. And I think that's where both of us felt like those conversations really helped us realize that there was a huge enthusiasm in the field of philanthropy for changing how we think about data and how we use data and manage data. And there were a lot of promising ideas that people were already doing. So how do we leverage that and bring that together? It's important, MacArthur didn't launch the PDC alone. It is really a group of enthusiastic stakeholders who are comfortable with discomfort and not having all the answers, change makers, other funders like MacArthur, data platform providers like Candid and Charity Navigator, and grants management system vendors, all who have a stake in solving this very complex problem. And it's centered on co-creation, it's centered on iteration and actually building something, And it's doing it all with humility. We don't have all the answers, but together I think we can find those answers and demonstrate them.
I really appreciate the inclusion of the community piece because we've talked about this. The quorum of data, getting a quorum of data is critical to the success of whatever platform play or interconnected platform play we end up doing. And in order to move to that quorum of data, people have to feel engaged. They have to feel like they've got a stake in both the governance and the ownership as well as the outcome for their work. Right. So we're going to move, well, great, the Slido's up. I see a couple of questions coming in. We're going to leave about 5-10 minutes for questions. So I'm going to move to a little bit of a quicker round just to ask each of you to dig in a little bit deeper on what you shared as you got started. Woodrow, I want to hear more about, is it 26 million, 28 million? You've got a campaign for a data commons. Tell us what's going on.
So we launched in June a campaign to support our data commons work. Prior to that, we had a lot of funders and we were working kind of on a project-to-project basis. And that mostly had to do with how people like to fund things as opposed to how we operate. Because for us, we're building this ecosystem. And so in June, we went to our funding community and said, look, we're building fundamental infrastructure for the social sector. This is necessary as a public good in order to support the work of a wide range of stakeholders, and we need to fund it like that. So our goal is $26 million. As of today, we're 49% of the way there. So our glass is either half empty or half full, depending on how I feel in the morning. But we've been we are very encouraged. It's been, we have found largely that funders are responding to this call to action. Again, it's about building the technology to leverage a growing community of practice, and it's about cross-cultural learning. It's recognizing that if we want systems change, we need to understand, first of all, we need visibility to the full context of this system, which has been lacking, and secondly, we need to look at other systems. And so we are deliberately building the tools to allow that.
I have one clarifying question for you. This might be on your minds as well. So you're raising 26 million, you're halfway there. That's incredible work. Is that part of the PDC? Is that complementing, competing? What is it, the PDC?
Yeah, so the Giving Tuesday Data Commons is not the Philanthropic Data Commons. Okay. Maybe some branding conversation we should have about that. We have lots and lots of partners. Our data commons is a lot of different data assets and many, many partners doing a lot of different things. So we have a data science team that does primary research and informs the tools that we need to build. We have a data engineering team that builds tools that might be leveraged by the PDC or other actors, including a lot of for-profit organizations and commercial enterprise. Okay. And then we have a knowledge management team that makes sure that what we're building turns into action and opportunity.
Okay, so concurrent with, I mean, everybody up here, everybody
yeah.
up here is doing something concurrent with. We don't know where it's going to end up. That's going to be my fire round question for you. But we're navigating. We're navigating. We're listening. We're learning. We're navigating. So, Anne-May, I want to ask the obvious question. How is what you're hearing here different than what Candid is doing or planning to do?
Yeah, I don't know that it's different because we're working with everybody towards a common goal here. I may be the CEO of Candid, but if you ask my team, when we make decisions as an organization, I don't make decisions based on what's best for Candid. I make decisions by what's best for the sector. And that's the lens I think we need to look at all decisions on. So as we have partnership discussions, I often like to open the discussion by saying, if we're all nonprofits and we're all mission driven, let's pretend we're one big organization. We're in the same organization, and let's figure out what's the most effective way for us to serve the sector together. And if that means Candid's role shifts in some way, we're totally open to that because at the end of the day, we want to make sure we serve the sector well. And today, we think we have the best solution for getting data to folks And we know that that solution needs to be better. So we're working with everybody else to figure out how do we make that better in the future. We've been working with Giving Tuesday to look at how our complementary data, we have a lot of data about institutional giving, they have a lot of data about individual giving. How can we bring that data together so we can bring better insights to the whole sector? I just only met Shahar last week, so I'm still learning about Impala's work and really am very open to understanding sort of what's the unique role a for-profit company can play in this space. And we've been deeply involved in the PDC for some time now, and as I mentioned earlier, we're exploring, we're working with PDC because we think the PDC is in the best position to answer some of the gnarliest questions that we honestly don't have great answers for yet. Whether that is about, how do you give, make data freely available and yet be financially sustainable? How do you make a shared governance model work in the, cacophony of voices that we have across the sector? How do we get to this common grant application? Can we do that by exchanging data amongst ourselves, or do we really have to fundamentally change funder behavior? I think these are all like big questions we want to find answers for, and we need to find answers for in order to shift the power dynamics in the sector and really enable the sector to do more good. And so our hope is that as we answer these questions, that we as Candid will adopt, we'll change our practices, we'll learn from what we're learning together collectively, and that my hope is that our respective work will really converge over time. Because at the end of the day, this is all about making the sector better. But in the meantime, we're just continuing to go. When you talk about action, like we're not waiting. We are taking action with what we have today. We're taking what I think of as a bottoms-up approach, building on the systems, data, platforms we already have in place today, where we have more than 90,000 nonprofits who have claimed their Candid profile, who are sharing their data in a standardized format that can be reused by anyone who is interested. And so we're building on that to move towards a common grant application, starting with demographic data and trying to get demographic data shared in a standardized way this way, so that each nonprofit isn't filling out dozens of different surveys, asking different questions with different answers. And we want to build upon that and keep adding more and more of the data that is needed in a grant application, so that over time, we can really reduce more and more of that burden.
Ooh, we're going to run out of time just when it's getting good. Okay, Shahar, you have an investment from the Barr Foundation for some work you're doing, I think, in Massachusetts, right? Am I getting it wrong? So you're in this space where you're navigating collaboration, competition. What do you see, you and your co-founder of Impala, what do you see as your role in this ecosystem?
So in order to reveal our role, the first thing that we did is just listen to what people are saying. So we actually just checked it before the conference. We spoke the last 18 months with more than 700 nonprofits and
700
nonprofits and philanthropic foundations, all sizes and types. I have my own nonprofit. I've seen the problems that they raised pretty much firsthand. And while really digging deep into those problems, we also wanted to see what's the overarching problems that we hear. And it always circles around three things. And I'm speaking about adopting technology in general. And I'm speaking about nonprofits specifically. Money, technological capabilities, and data. So most organizations wouldn't have the money to buy the data or to buy the software and the tools that is required for them to take this data and make insights out of it. Even if they can have this software, implementing it, customizing it to their needs, maintaining it is something extremely hard. So they lack also the technological capabilities. And finally, even if you have these softwares and you implemented them, you can only use the data that you have in your organization internally, which is almost by definition a fraction of what you can use. And I think you can all imagine how it is for you with your CRM solutions and your grant-making solutions. So we basically said, okay, let's tackle these problems straight ahead. And we're doing it by essentially building, first of all, a data infrastructure that is free for everyone. So again, every 990 of every philanthropic foundation and nonprofit available for everyone. So
okay, so I'm going to repeat what I think you just said. Every 990 for every nonprofit and philanthropic data available for free on your data infrastructure.
Yes,
I heard
and
that
that's
right. Okay. Just checking.
Yes, that's the first layer, but in order to really take it to the next, so we tackle the data and the money problems. For technological capabilities, we are now on top of this data starting to build different applications that are specifically tailored for this sector. The first thing we built, and those of you who joined our session yesterday saw it, we call it ecosystem intelligence, and it's the ability to, instead of review one specific organization at a time or one specific funder at a time, to define a whole ecosystem of nonprofits and foundations and funders. So you can imagine, when I'm saying the word ecosystem, homelessness in California, youth education in Minnesota, and there's pretty much endless of those, and see all of the nonprofits that are working there, all of the foundations that are working there, how they're working together, trends, et cetera, et cetera. So I really think that like we came into this sector because we identify those problems. If those are the problems that people are speaking with, let's start with fixing those. And then the iteration loop is something that allows us to improve and improve and improve. For us, it's really just the first step. We're very excited about next things that we're doing. We just launched a few weeks ago, and the reception and the feedback was really exceptional. And you can see the appetite of people have to this data and to those tools. I'm excited.
There is, we'll close out in a few minutes, in 10 minutes, and we'll provide links to all of your websites for folks who may not be familiar with them. We're going to have a fire round at the end with a surprise question for y'all. But before we do that, I've got a very common sense elephant in the room question up on Slido right now from, I think, Jamie. Thank you, Jamie, great question. It feels like the vast majority of data we collect directly from nonprofits is currently underused. Let's be honest about that, it is. Do we actually have the capacity to use these shared data assets right now in our foundations? And I think, May, you touched on this, funder behavior changing as well. Do we currently have the capacity to use the data we already ask for? I don't know if anyone wants to weigh in there.
I mean, as a funder, I would say it depends. I think some funders are really using data and really using it to inform their decision-making, inform their strategies. I also, and John and I at MacArthur have talked a lot about this, that there is a data literacy opportunity in philanthropy in general that I think, and we see it at MacArthur, where there's oftentimes a reticence to use the data that we collect. And I think the other question that we are asking at MacArthur is, just because you can collect it doesn't mean you should, right? Like, so what are we? And acknowledging that by asking for it or collecting it, which seems more passive, you are putting burden on folks that this is not their job. Their job is to do the work in the world. We're asking them to do our job, right? So we need to change, scrutinize what we're asking for, and be really clear about what we're using it for. And if we're not using it, stop collecting it.
Steve, give me some eyes if you want to comment on this, okay? I have Woodrow, give me an eye. Okay, everybody's going to comment. Woodrow,
everyone's going to comment. I think that's really important, in that we need to change the fundamental relationship here to make it less extractive. Because, and part of that has to do with, and I've been hearing this a bit at this conference.
And does extractive mean we take it from you and remember, we're not doing buzzwords, right? So we take it from you, we don't use it, we take it from you, we don't pay you to give it to us, like we take it, we don't give it back to you, you don't have any control.
We should be thinking about the value proposition for those that are providing data first. That needs to be the first principle of why you get data from somebody. And something I've been hearing a little bit, it's been very interesting over the last couple of days, some conversation I've heard, and I just want to challenge folks in the room to think about this. Certainly some of you already are, and that's encouraging, but data issues should start with outcomes. So I hear a little bit more than I would like of folks saying, I need a technology solution, think about why first. And so then you've got some folks who are thinking strategy, that's great, but too often I think that strategy is, how do I manage my data? As opposed to what outcomes do I want from my data? And so if you put those together, then you're going to start from the outcomes you're trying to get for the people who are giving you that data first and foremost, and that's how you build a community that is not exploitive of those organizations that are doing the work, as Liz said.
Great, and I love the concept of, I've heard this from several of you, what is the value proposition for the nonprofit of what we're asking for, right? And being clear on that, as well as a value proposition for ourselves if we really need it as a funder. So Anne May, then Shahar.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We're asking for way too much data, only a fraction of which is actually used, especially when we're asking for that data in silos, right, where each funder asks for their separate data and then sort of hides it behind their walls. So I agree, we have to focus on the nonprofit and the experience of the nonprofit, because nonprofits are the ones doing the real work and making the difference, right? And so what we're trying to do with the candid profile is just take the fields that are commonly asked by lots of funders so that you're sharing that data one time in a standardized way that everyone can use. And what we're finding is more and more funders every day are starting to both move more towards general operating support, which we also think is important. But because of that, being able to just rely on the candid profile to answer most of the questions that they would ask otherwise. And so it saves an enormous amount of time for nonprofits in being able to fill out their profile once and be able to serve innumerous numbers of funders who can then maybe ask just a few select questions that might be unique to their circumstances.
Shahar, you come at these questions in unique ways. What are you thinking?
I tend to agree with everyone. I think, it's easy for people in the room that are mostly in foundations to say that they're asking for too much. I would say foundations also are not data repositories. They don't need to collect all of this. They don't need to work in collecting data. You're doing philanthropy, you're doing social impact work, and data collection, curation, extracting the value of it is a whole other thing. And I think it's a big challenge to, we worked with the Boston Foundation. They had a whole initiative called the Giving Commons, which was collecting a lot of data, trying to put it into profiles. In the end, they let it go because it was just too difficult for them to maintain. And I think it's a good example of this issue. I think that, again, it connects to what I said before about technological capabilities. The data obviously should be there, it should be open for everyone. Then we should see the questions that come up, and these would never be the same questions for every funder, but answer them in an open way, a standardized way, something that everybody can see. I think that's the only viable and sustainable way moving forward.
We've got more questions than we have time, but I'm going to ask the obvious one. Mark is asking this. How do we get these data commons working together rather than separately? And I don't think what Mark is asking is just the one data commons to rule them all. I think he's saying, how do we get them to work together rather than being competitive? Go for it.
I'll start with that because I think that's really one of our strengths is providing a framework for things to come together. And I would say, I think we're ahead of this community on this already. We're already there.
Ooh, that's a challenge. You just
Anne May brought it up. We're talking about how our respective assets are better together, and we have systems and tools to do this. Look for the funding proposals. They're coming.
Wow, this is great. So I'm channeling some Leon Wilson here. Those of you who know Leon, he was like, Chantal, have the tough conversations up there. Have some tough conversations. So thank you. Anybody else want to jump in?
I just want to say that, of course, collaboration is a great thing to do, and I think, again, we see good examples of collaboration and how they can move the needle forward. But I think competition isn't a dirty word, and we shouldn't look at it as a dirty word. I think, in the end, the only question we should ask ourselves, the people on the stage, is, and that's how we should measure ourselves, how much value, how much benefit are we creating for nonprofits and funders in the field? Only question. I think competition, innovation, those are probably the strongest drivers that can make us get to those results. And we should be very wary that, collaborating on a common grant application by having the word common in it, I think it basically says that we have to do it together, but we shouldn't really let it freeze us on the status quo in other problems.
So don't let collaboration freeze. I actually tend to agree. I think this is very healthy right now. I find this a very healthy, energetic, fruitful. We've never seen anything like this in philanthropy. This is beautiful right now. Anne May, jump in.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think competition is very much healthy. It helps us all be better. And I think competition is a little different when it comes to the social sector versus the private sector. In the social sector, I think competition is great. We should all be experimenting, all coming up with better solutions, but all in the vein of making each other better and serving the sector better, right? In the private sector, competition often becomes a zero-sum game. It's me winning and you losing. And in the social sector, I don't think it should be that way.
I would echo that. I just think I think of it as like, I used to run track, and so you compete with your fellow teammates. They make you better so that when you go out and compete against another school or whatever, you're at the top of your game.
That's the hope.
And
That's the hope.
That's what I think we're doing.
That's the hope. I agree. We're going to close out. Jonathan, Amy, Jamie, sorry we didn't get to all of your questions. They were great ones. We're going to end with the fun fire round. It's a softball, but here's the trick. Okay. You get 2 words to describe your hope for the next 2 years or the next 20 years. You can pick. There's a 2 thing happening. Your 2 words to describe the hope for the next 2 years, or you can pick 20 years if that's where you want to go, but you can't use any buzzwords. No buzzwords. I don't want democratizing in there. I don't want no buzzwords. No buzzwords. So 2 words to your hope for the next 2 years, or if you're one of those people way out there, you can pick 20 years, and you can't use any buzzwords.
I'll go first.
Go.
My 6-year-old daughter used these 2 words for me last night
Okay.
when I told her I was nervous about this panel. And she said, "Mommy, breathe and dream."
Oh, I love it. Woo.
From the mouths of babes.
Woodrow's ready. I can see it.
So my 11-year-old would say, get good. I will say universal generosity.
Those aren't buzzy. Those are real words. Okay. It's good. Great. Anyone else ready? Shahar's looking at me.
My daughter is 1.5, so she'll probably say that. Yeah, goo-goo. Is my message to the sector. I wanted to use democratizing data, which I don't think it's that cliche. But really opening this field for everyone.
Open forever. Thank you. Anne-May.
I would say unleash nonprofits.
Nice.
Unleash nonprofits. Whoa. All right, so keep that going. This was a very courageous conversation. Some folks were a little bit nervous to come up here and have this conversation, but we wanted to have it for you. So thank you, everybody, for coming up here. Thank you.